shared afterwards. So just be mindful of that. Just by introduction, there's two speakers today. That's myself, who's James Service, marketing manager here at Goodwille. And many of you will be familiar with me if you're existing clients. And then we're joined with Joanna Dodd, who is the managing director for Rochester PR, who is one of the partners that we've worked with quite a lot, I would say, over the years. And we share a number of mutual clients with Joanna, which we'll look at some examples as we go through this session later on today. Just 30 seconds, a brief overview of Goodwille for those that maybe aren't familiar with us. So professional services business, we've been around for 25 years, helping companies from abroad that are looking at coming into the UK market. And those companies are all different shapes and sizes and stages of growth. And this session really is going to look at those companies that maybe are new to the UK market, maybe want to accelerate, or maybe have not received the traction in the UK. And Joanna's going to explain some ways, and hopefully you can get some more coverage, and hopefully raise your profile a bit during your journey. In terms of what we do, 5 departments: corporate governance, finance, HR, payroll, and virtual offices. A really flexible arrangement of services. Pick and choose any combination of services you require. Change them over time as you start to get traction in the UK, add things in, take them away. And we typically say 95% of the things we can do in-house for you to come to the UK market. And for that 5% of things that we don't do, we have some really strong partners, or we call friends, around us, the likes of Rochester PR, who will cover the PR aspect for a number of clients that decide to set up in the UK. So without further ado, I will hand over to Joanna, who will go into the session, and I will ask some questions, I'm sure, as we go. So over to you, Joanna, to introduce.
Great. Thank you so much. And really good to be here. And thanks very much for making us a friend of Goodwille. It's reciprocal. So yeah. So I'm going to chat through quite a few questions that Goodwille posed that they thought you might be interested in. And then that's there. But there'll be time at the end for any questions that you've got. And obviously, if there's anything that I haven't covered and that you want to hear more about, you can ask at that stage. So very briefly, an introduction to us on the next slide. Really, we specialise very much in what James said, so international businesses coming into the UK. On the right, you'll see the 3 main things that we really achieve for people. It's finding out, you know, what their message should be for the UK at any stage that we're working with them, who they need to talk to in the UK, so what we would call the stakeholders or the publics, and then the tactics that you would use to get to them. And those are both the very obvious media relations that people assume is what PR is all about, which is a lot of what we do, but then also a lot of other things that actually come under the remit of the paid, owned, earned, shared media space that we work in. So kicking off, one of the first questions posed was what is PR? So on the next couple of slides, I'm just very briefly going to give you some pointers about that, what we think about it. So really our view is that every company needs a reputation, and it depends on its reputation to be successful. Whether you do PR or not, everybody who comes in contact with you will have an opinion about you. And that might be that we don't know you, or it might be that somebody else has said something about you. And that's what, you know, PR is trying to get the right perception out there, because those perceptions that people have will drive them to think whether they want to engage with you, whether they want to work with you, buy from you, whatever else it is. And in many ways, you know, in sort of the world today, with it being super competitive, you know, your reputation is what helps you stand out from the crowd, and makes you applicable to your target audience. So, in essence, PR, next slide, please, is all about reputation. So it's what you do, what you say, and what others say about you. And the PR discipline that we do is looking after that reputation, trying to make sure that it's understood, that people get to know you, appreciate you, and you know that helps influence their decision to buy from you. So for us, this next bit is really our definition, which is the planned and back on another one, sorry, it is the planned and sustained effort to establish and maintain goodwill, there you go, goodwill, and mutual understanding between an organization and its publics, which is what we call, audiences. And that's what effective PR is trying to do, is help manage that reputation. So two quotes. Thanks, Nancy. Two quotes on the next slide, which are, well, I think nobody's actually sure whether Bill Gates said this, but everybody quotes him as saying it. So he said something vaguely similar. And the second one, another US, I quite like, because, I think it does, to a certain extent, explain what we do for clients. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some hire PR officers to do it. So to share how great they are. So in terms
Joanna,
of
just a quick question, perhaps, for
yeah,
me. You
yeah,
mentioned there about managing reputation.
yeah.
How many of them, would you say, or how many of your clients are proactively doing it, and how many are doing? I saw crisis management as one of the things which you mentioned. So, is it like, for example, clients that you have which only do something when something goes wrong, or is it this? How's the split?
That's sometimes when people come to us for the first time, actually, when they've got a problem and they need somebody to help them solve the problem. I would say it's more that more people are not managing their reputation in the first place than anything else, because they are, and we understand it, focused on the sales pipeline and doing some Google ads and whatever, and actually forget that there's a sort of a bit of glue that helps join that all together, which is where we believe we sort of come in on the PR front. So it's more, they come to us if they've got a problem often. We sometimes do have clients for whom we only work on a crisis management situation. But that's relatively rare, I think.
Yeah. Cool.
Exciting, but rare.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of thing which only comes to mind when something goes wrong. You're like, oh my God, now I need to do something. And then maybe it's too late.
No, we did have a client once meet us at an event and said, I must talk to you. I said, oh, great. And they literally rang me the next morning and said, we need you on a call with, it was actually a trade union. We need you on a call with them tomorrow because we've got an issue that's breaking. So sort of like, that was urgent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of when, sort of leading on from that, when you're, that's the defend yourself, when should you consider PR? I mean, actually, of course, I would say this, but any time is good. It can help you do an enormous number of things. Reputation is obviously on there, builds credibility and trust. It can help you, if you're reaching employees or potential employees, particularly in the UK, it's a competitive market to get talent. And so it's important, we believe that companies really do engage with PR to make sure that they're getting what they want from the UK market. So typically for us, for example, a client would say, we want you to raise our profile, raise awareness, and usually also typically raise profile of our founder or managing director or senior personnel, because that's who is the face of the company. So why PR is quite important, if you haven't done it in the UK yet, but maybe have done it back home, is that journalists will always take a view of you. So when we're talking to the media, and I think this is true of, if I was looking to buy from you. So next slide, Nancy, thank you, is that sort of idea that people will judge you on whether you are active. In the UK, we really do work a lot on marketing and PR. It's really well established. We automatically would search for people and see what people are saying about them, and journalists will too. And this just gives you an example of a company that was coming in from overseas that we pitched out to a radio journalist for a business program. And they said no, because they're not very big. They don't do social media, and they haven't actually really had any press coverage. So even, a UK journalist will judge you on how successful you appear to have been in your home territory as well, which is sort of annoying, and obviously is what we try to overcome. But it is important here in this country. We rely on it a lot, so it's unusual not to be doing something, I think.
I guess that's just as things become more access available online. So
exactly.
I mean, searching reviews, everyone searches for reviews now if you're going to buy something from somebody new. And I hadn't really thought about it before, but I guess like if you search somebody and they don't come up, then that's maybe a bit unusual.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what journalists do as much as your customers will be doing on you. Yeah, for sure. So another question that you asked us to think about is PR free? I mean, editorial is free. It's earned. What I said earlier about paid, owned, earned. Editorial is earned. You can sometimes pay for it. You can do this sort of quasi, advertorial route where it's editorial, but it's also paid for, but that's unlikely. So we do often get companies saying, but back in my home territory, we have to pay for that side of coverage or that type of coverage. Generally speaking, it's not, but obviously you're paying a PR company to do it. If you're paying a PR company to do it, or even if you're doing it in-house, you're making a big investment of time and some money. So whether you're paying a fee to people like us, or you would want a media monitoring service or a really good media database distribution service, because you can't really do it very well without. So it's not free in the sense of you're paying for a service or you're employing somebody to do it in-house and therefore it's costing you money, but the actual end result of getting coverage is it is hugely valuable, and yes, is perceived to be independent, and that's why that endorsement is so valuable. So comparing sort of UK to other markets, I mean, I think there isn't a huge difference. Is PR different, than anywhere else? Not really. I do think that the fact that the UK is perceived to be a challenging but really good and important market actually, says something about you. So the value of PR here in the UK is hugely important. That sort of, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere type approach. So again, we have a lot of clients who, because they're seen as successful in the UK through the PR we do, they actually have a knock-on effect into other territories. So it can be really valuable. The other differences are things like the wealth of media here. We have a huge number of media on so many different verticals and topics that it's almost impossible to come up with a client who hasn't got some media that's appropriate to them and their business and what they're trying to achieve. I was just talking to somebody the other day about timber. I said, we know the timber press really well. He's going, how? You haven't got anything that's obviously timber. It's actually because one of our clients does timber education, so we know all the stakeholders in timber. So there are loads and loads of different sector media, and as I say, the endorsement value of the UK media is perceived to be hugely high. We also have a lot of international media based here in the UK, so we actually, for most of our clients, do more than just UK, because, for example, we've got an Australian client and we PR them back into Australia from here because there's certain media here, and then also into Latin America where they have some business. So you can do a lot from a UK-based PR consultancy. The other thing I'd say, and I don't know whether this is true for other markets, but I would beware and be wary of ChatGPT. So everybody now says, oh, I'm going to put all this through ChatGPT. And a lot of the journalists here are saying we won't accept anything that we perceive to be generated by ChatGPT. It's not valuable to us. It's usually a bit rubbish. So don't create your press releases if you're going to through ChatGPT. I really wouldn't advise it. Plus, I would also caution you on, there's no point in you putting out lots of information about your business into the ether. So then you Goodwill, you asked us to look at sort of any PR trends that might be around. Not a huge number, but the next slide is something that comes up from Google, which we just find quite interesting, where they were talking about B2B acquisition, and that they reckon it takes 11 interactions, 7 hours of content across 4 different platforms to land a piece of business. I don't know whether the numbers are right, to be absolutely honest. That's up to Google, but it is very true what we know from our clients. We had one client, for example, who absolutely knew it down to the nth degree, and for them it was 19 interactions. So they had that really worked out. And what they did is they said, well, if PR can take out sort of 3, 4, 5 of those, that saved us a lot of time and effort from valuable people that we want to be out generating the next prospect, not necessarily always working on the one we've got. So that idea about, having great content, great stories to tell, and spreading it across different platforms, social would be one, but not the only one, I think is super useful. And then the other sort of trend that I just think is useful to share is this slide, which sort of tells you, and they update it every year, sort of every minute of the day, what is actually happening out there. So, every minute of every day, I mean, some of it's not so relevant to businesses, but things like, 43 years of content is being uploaded, or, 241 million emails are being sent. So it really, I suppose, just for us, it just shows, oh my goodness, this is a really challenging market to stand out and get, any market, but, you know, to stand out and get noticed in. So
how much of it, Joanna, would you say is relationship driven? Obviously, you touched on your relationship with the timber merchant or the timber press, etc. How much of it comes down to who you know? Because I'm thinking historically, when we've sent out a press release and we think, oh, that's actually really interesting, that's definitely going to get published, then you hear nothing.
Yeah.
So I mean, is it a big part of it, relationships?
I think a lot of it is, I think you're right, a lot of people send out a press release, and we always say to our clients, you know, it's actually the follow-up that counts. It is about having a relationship. So, you know, if with journalists we can sort of say, hey, we've got something interesting coming up from X, Y, and Z, look out for it in the next 2-3 days. That helps. Obviously, the fact that we're a trusted source of information also helps, because most of the journalists, not most of the journalists, but the journalists we need to interact with know us and know that we're, you know, valid and valuable and give them good content. And then it's the follow-up, it's the sell. It's quite a, you know, it's a sell to get, you know, to get coverage. Is not a release on its own is I mean, it's a good starting point, of course, that's where we start from too, but it doesn't usually generate what you want. And then the last sort of slide on trends is just sort of, you know, talking about, I mean, I don't particularly think these are particularly new for now, but, you know, the whole thing about AI, we're all watching what's happening on AI, but, you know, brand visibility, you know, making sure that, you know, people often ask us on the analytics, like, oh, you can't quantify PR results, but you can. As you were saying earlier, James, you know, the fact that everything's online, you can absolutely track click-throughs and, you know, where people have joined, where people have come to sign up for your newsletter and things like that. So it's much more visible now, the value that you know, PR can deliver. So next we said we'd talk about sort of how to find your story, how to create your story. And this next slide is the one that I showed right at the beginning on the top right, which is about finding your UK message, you know, why you are relevant to the UK, why now? So why now when you're coming in? Why now when you've been here for a bit? You know, what is it that you are delivering for this market that nobody else is delivering? Where is your, you know, where is your niche? What is your point of difference? How can we sell it? And going back to this sort of idea about PR and sales, I mean, when we're speaking to a journalist, that umbrella message for our clients has to be so crisp and tight, because that's often as far as we get with the journalists. You know, if they're busy, if that doesn't really hit home right at the beginning, then it's difficult to get them more interested as you phone them, as you speak to them. So we always put a lot of time and effort with our clients into making sure that the messaging is really clear for the UK market, and for each release is equally clear. And this is how we build it. So you have your one key message, your other messages underneath might be, you know, maybe your sector specialization or whatever. And then the proof points are really the facts and figures. It's you know, how many offices you have, how many people you have, how many ISO accreditations, all those sort of things. But they're not a story to the media. They're not a message to the media. That it's not interesting. And the reason why it's not interesting is this sort of thing on the next slide, which is what questions you're trying to answer to the media. Nancy, if you wouldn't mind flipping over, thank you. So on the right hand side is this sort of slight joke from us about truth, but you know what the media are looking for. But it is true, what they are looking for are things that are topical, relevant, unusual. Trouble, that's when they're chasing you down the street for crisis management, James, but also, you know, it could be a problem that you're really solving here, and human interest. So that on the left are sort of the you know, questions that we would say you should pose to yourself. Why the UK? You know, why are you activating PR now? You know, is it a long-term thing? Are you trying to do something quite short-term? What is your business doing that's generally different? The problem you're solving, that's the thing. How can you prove it? And then we would also suggest that you really look at what your competition is up to. That's super useful. It's not so that you copy them at all, but actually the more that you know what they're doing, the better it is. And the principle about sort of PR and press releases in general is this point coming up, which is the show, don't tell. So it's all about you're not writing an advert for a journalist. You're actually saying, you know, this is what we do. This is how we are, and let the journalists make up their mind whether they want to do and talk to you and write about you. So if you're writing your own PR release, it's tempting to put in all the adjectives, and that's what ChatGPT does, which is rubbish. Don't do it. Journalists get put off by that. They, don't say you're, groundbreaking, unless you really are, unless you can prove it. Let the journalists make it up. And often that's why that endorsement is so strong, because you get that really strong commentary from a journalist. And really think as well, often we're tempted to think this is super interesting. I know it's really interesting, but is it really interesting to people outside your organization? Is it newsworthy? Is it even going to hit the news because it's, topical? And all this that I've said before, problem you're solving, how can you prove it? So think of it as show, don't shout, don't tell, or certainly don't shout. And then how to write a press release. You may know this already, but, very clear headline. We had an example from a new client yesterday and said, we've written our headlines and we've got 4 of them. We can't have 4. You're really going to confuse somebody with 4 things you want to say in one headline.
I guess that's key messaging when you mentioned that earlier.
Exactly.
Joanna, know what you're trying to say.
Exactly, because it's tempting to throw everything at it, but it doesn't always work. And then you sort of, you make sure you've got the opening paragraph. You try and answer all the main key questions: what, when, who, where, why. Next paragraph, tell them what to know. And then you've got the opportunity, a bit like I was talking about messaging, to add in the more context. Again, be honest, unbiased. Don't use too much jargon. Quotes, always important. And make sure you've got the date at the top, so it's clear when you're releasing it and also when something is launching, and they're often not, as you know, exactly the same. And the reason for keeping the jargon out and trying to be really simple and clear is, great old quote, which is really true. If you can't explain it simply, the theory is you don't understand it well enough. But certainly from a media point of view, they just don't like to be bamboozled and, made to consider too many things and then feel stupid they haven't understood it. So I'm going to skip a few slides because time is quite short. So there's some information there about hints and tips of when to release your release. The next slide is really talking about the different tactics that I mentioned at the beginning that you can look at. So we're concentrating very much on media today, but there's loads of other things within this paid, owned, earned, shared media space where we operate. And then flicking on, which obviously you can look at later and ask any questions, and then flicking on to maybe just a couple of quick ideas about case studies. So this is just an example of somebody coming in. This is from Australia, and who got 9 pieces of coverage within the first few weeks of us sending out the press release. And there you can see what a journalist will do with a headline on the left: revolutionizing business efficiency. That's what you want. That wasn't our title in the press release. That's what you want them to do. You want them to write about you like that. The next slide is a different client, a fintech, that we first 2 days of getting a release out there, 10 pieces of coverage, 13 social media posts. It's not always that quick. It depends what you're actually announcing. And also we do their LinkedIn for them. So we saw massive value in terms of what we were doing on the LinkedIn side, both for them as a company and for one of their co-founders. And then the next one.
So I was going to say, Joan, do you find people thinking they want to get, for example, like the front page on the Sunday Times, for example, when there's lots of value, obviously, in these industry-specific publications in the UK?
Huge, yeah. I mean, I think the nationals are where everybody wants to end up for the right reasons, but actually, I'd almost say this is the workhorse element of it. That these are the titles that are going to generate the business objectives that you want. Plus also, going back to that point about, who's going to be interested in this outside of your company, it is very difficult if you're sort of new to the UK or, scaling up here or something else, to really think, if you're thinking about the Sunday Times, they tend to talk mostly about listed companies anyway, that's why reading the media is quite important. You can see what they're sort of really focusing on. So that's why the messaging, if you want to get into those, you have to think quite carefully what's going to be the story that's really going to inspire them. The next one is very different from from Canada, and that's really about, you know, very niche type area, virtual patent marking, and a lovely quote from him, which on the next slide, but I'll leave you to read that later. And then this advice that we had from one client, not to us, but speaking at an event, a Tensi from Norway, and I just love the way, I love the way he delivered it, but also what he had to say about it, because it's very much, you know, what we say as well. You know, think about the industry sector focus, chase the big and small company logos, you know, and do the PR around them to help you achieve that. Go to the right events, be prepared to speak, as we said, part of our sort of peso area. And then, of course, because he said something nice about us, but punch above your weight, use PR, you know, to help you look appealing to the UK market. So that's a quick rattle through. But yeah, I suppose all of our reason for doing this is, you know, you don't get a second chance to make a positive first impression when you come into the UK. So, and then it's about, when you've made that, manage that reputation you've got to best effect for your business.
Cool.
Yes.
Quick question, Joanna.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've noted that it might vary between different publications, but are there kind of any themes which just generally seem to do well or maybe get better reach? So things that maybe come to the top of my head, like sustainability, for example, is there any way they can demonstrate that? Is that kind of something which is more interesting than other bits and pieces? You mentioned like being new to the UK might not be enough, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think the ones that probably aren't so much is we're here to fundraise, and you know, you've got to wrap that under a different way. The sustainability sort of area is quite challenging because it trends. So, you know, you find that everybody's written about sustainability. So that's where you really need to consider what's that publication that I'm, you know, wanting to get into. What's it really interested at the moment? And you can find that quite easily from reading it and knowing what it's talking about. I would say we're always interested in founder stories in the UK, you know, why you started the business, how you started the business. And, you know, any really good business is going to have good stories to tell about what they do, why they do it, how they achieve it. And then the extra things that you might have that are very specific to you can come into play if there's a great feature coming up on, for example, sustainability. But you know, I'd be leery about chasing the themes without sort of interrogating what you've got and what might work.
Fine. Another question we've had is, how do you recommend to approach British journalists on industry-specific news website that you want to target if you do not have access to a PR tool or a PR marketing firm?
It's really making sure that, you know, so on that website, that you know those journalists, what they're writing about. So you do have to get to know them a bit by reading what they're talking about. You know, their email addresses would be relatively easy to find, actually, or you can pitch them on LinkedIn or find them on Twitter, X, and pitch them there as well. But you need to have a really good list, because if you go to the wrong one, to be absolutely honest, it will get, you know, they will just ignore you. So it's very rare that you'll get a response. Don't be tempted to BCC lots of journalists, because often they have blockers for that. So, you know, I would approach them one-on-one with a really good, you know, again, that email sort of subject header should be a really captivating why they want to talk to you. But you can find them for sure. You just need to build up your media list that way, and make sure you get them. One of the reasons we use the database we use is because it is approved for many journalists' inboxes. So although we do lots of individual mails as well, because we know them, often if we're sending out press release and want to do it at speed, we would use our big chunky database. But yeah, it's just a question of finding the right ones, and, you know, don't target them after they've just written. Say they've just written on sustainability. Now is not the time to write to them with, I see you write about sustainability. I've got a good sustainability story, because the chances are they've done it as far as they're concerned. Yeah.
Fine. One final quick question. In terms of article length or release length, what would you typically expect it to be, number of words approx?
So no longer than 2 sides of A4, and for a press release that's usually spaced as well, so it's not 1 line spacing, it's 1.5 line spacing. You know, with more information to come, always good visuals, you know, good photography, photo of the person you're quoting or whatever else, that really helps as well. you can have really short, press releases. The ones that go on too long are the worst ones. So, if you can extract bits and put it in somewhere else, we've got supporting, quotes, or we've got whatever else it might be, because journalists, and we embed them in the release that we send out. We don't send them as attachments. There's another thing that will stop you getting through. But they don't want to read masses. And that first paragraph is what they, if that grabs them, they'll certainly want to embellish and talk about the release in general.
Cool, perfect. Well, thank you everybody that's joined the session with Rochester PR. If you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to Joanna directly, come to me or Nancy, and we can introduce you. As I mentioned, they've worked with a number of our clients. They've done some great things. So, and we would encourage you to get in touch if you are looking to get some PR within the UK, or if you just have any questions. I'm sure Joanna's more than happy to help as well. This is part of a series that we're running, Goodwille and Friends. So there's more webinars on different topics that are coming up over the coming months, which Nancy will circulate and share with you. So do feel free to sign up for those too. But appreciate everyone's time, and thank you very much, Joanna, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Hope it's useful.
Thanks a lot. Bye then. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.